Welcome to Developing Author Identity Metadata, Why a Small Publisher Can Address a Major Challenge. I'm David Parker. I'm the publisher and founder of LibPlaces Publishing. Our panel today will include myself, of course, Katie and Powell, who's a lecturer in sociology and Black Studies at Birmingham City University, also a LibPlaces Publishing author. Jeremy Garskoff, Assistant Dean and Director of Collections and Technical Services at Gettysburg College, and Amy McCoy, who's a senior manager of product operations at ProQuest, which is, of course, a part of Clarivate. So we're going to begin with the publisher perspective on the why of an author identity metadata project. There were really three reasons that got us going on this project at LibPlaces Publishing. The first is, of course, for the last many years, we've heard from many readers, librarians, publishers, authors, editors, that folks who are reading our books want to know who wrote them. If they're in a class on queer studies, reading a book about queer theory, they'd like to know whether the author is queer or identifies as queer, for example. And so we've been hearing this again and again and again. And Live Places Publishing is a relatively new startup publisher, a couple years old. And so our author community is very tight with the editorial team. And our author community has said to us over and over again that they are quite interested in representing who they are to their readers. And that really follows quite logically from the sort of ethos of Live Places Publishing. Each one of our books is organized around an exploration of the intersections of identity and location and place. So our authors are exploring their identity or the identity of the people they're writing about in the context of place or location. So these issues of representing, self-representing identity have come up again and again within our author community. The last reason we decided to tackle this is it's a really big, daunting challenge. Imagine if a publisher was 30, 40, 50 years old with tens of thousands of titles and had to try to go back and imagine identifying author identity metadata for every one of the books. Or if they were publishing thousands of books or 1,000 books a year, it's a real challenge. Lit Places Publishing is a little over 2 years old. We have 105 books under contract. We will have published 25 by the end of this year. So we are at a scale and place where working with our author community to identify the categories of metadata that we want to capture and represent, and to get their buy-in, their permission, their willingness to offer up that information is still daunting, but it's manageable. So we thought this is a great opportunity for a small publisher to serve our readership, serve our author community, and hopefully contribute something to the larger discussion about author identity metadata. So what's at stake? All the panelists today, by the way, are taking this format of what's at stake and then what reservations do we have. So what's at stake for a small publisher like Live Places Publishing? Well, first, if we collect this metadata, and again, at the willingness and agreement of our authors, we collect this metadata, we're able to translate this into the facets and browses that we put onto our platform. So again, if you're a professor or a student seeking out a title for a course reading, and you want to know if the book in our Latinx Studies collection was written by an author from Mexico or an author from Guatemala, you would be able to search on country of origin and know that this, in fact, was written by an author who has identified as a Guatemalan. It also will allow us to enhance our catalog records. Now, this is something that Jeremy and Amy will talk a bit more about, how it impacts upon catalog records. But we see all sorts of opportunities as a publisher to build out better catalog records that we can share, into the discovery ecosystem. Reservations. My biggest reservation, and I think probably this you'll hear repeated, and you'll be feeling it yourself, is this can really put an author at risk. We live in contentious, difficult times. Saying who you are, exposing, personal metadata, can really expose you to a world of potential outcomes that might not be desirable. So we are super cognizant of that, and I'll conclude before I turn it over to Katie and by reiterating that everything we're doing is originating with author uh, development of the categories. In other words, they're helping us develop the categories, and author agreement and willingness to share that metadata, and importantly, to be able to modify and amend that metadata over time. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you, David. I am certainly going to reiterate some of those points that you have made. Again, hi, my name is Katie Powell, and I'm a lecturer in Black Studies and Sociology at Birmingham City University. And my perspective is from the author. And I think for me, this is an opportunity as an author to volunteer how I want to be identified to possible readers and libraries out there. In many ways, this concerns authorial epistemology and subject knowledge. And when we think about diversity and equality, uh, it's more than just representing the subject knowledge or the race or gender or ethnicity of a person. And so with author volunteered metadata, I am able to define my authorial knowledge and identity in multiple ways. As someone who was born in Jamaica, educated and raised in the United States, and then has lived in the UK for the last 13 years, place becomes very complicated for me, and being able to volunteer those different facets of my identity and how they have been impacted by place is very important. Anyone who would read my work would understand that, but before they even get to that point, being able to assemble the kind of taxonomy of who they think I am or the perspective I'm coming from would be very important. Black women academics, certainly within the space of Black feminism, especially, have fought for the recognition and legitimacy of Black women's and other women's lived experiences as forms of legitimate knowledge making. And I think that I volunteered metadata is a part of extending that legitimacy of knowledge. I also think that identity and how we think about identity is really evolving, and it is becoming more niche, and we're really drilling down into the taxonomy of identity. We certainly see that with current sort of Gen Z. And I think that that is only something that is going to get stronger as more ways to identify ourselves and more ways to share who we are become, proliferate, that identity is going to evolve beyond binary gender, race, ethnicity, and even political and religious affiliations. And I think this is a way of preparing for that. I think that author metadata is also part of being reflexive in the 21st century and an ode to interpretivism and away from positivism, which posits that there is one sort of like objective place from which knowledge can flow. And with this metadata like identity, you're able to enter into perspectives or understand forms of knowledge from experiences that you would never have as a person by living through an author's work, not as a novel, but through sociological perspectives, understanding religious perspectives, and so forth. And the authors are able to offer and feel comfortable in giving a perspective from an embodied experience, and not just one from a narrow place of accepted subject knowledge. There are, of course, some reservations to this. As David said earlier, I worry about artificial intelligence and the exploitation of it. The more data that we create about ourselves, the more there is to be mined perhaps in the future and to be exploited. So, of course, that is a risk that we're taking. But I do in part wonder if it is any more of a risk than what we take every day with offering up information about ourselves on various social media sites and even our online professional profiles. Of course, as we sort of extend this data about authors, we're still more than a set of tick boxes. So in no way am I suggesting that offering up these even more niche ways of identifying authors and the perspectives that they're coming from, that somehow taken together, you have a complete picture of the person or the writer. Just that it helps, because within intersectionality, you can have 10,000 different perspectives of being a Black woman, for instance, or, a migrant from Chile. So this is just another way of drilling down into more specific forms of knowledge and experience. And over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Kadian. As David mentioned, my name is Jeremy Garskoff. I'm the Assistant Dean and Director of Collections and Technical Services at Gettysburg College. I'm also a board member of Live Places Publishing. So thank you for attending our session. I'm going to talk about the author identity metadata, what I call the AIM project, really from three different perspectives: from an academic library, from a cataloging and metadata perspective, from a collections perspective, and then from a discovery and research perspective. So starting with cataloging and metadata, the Live Places Publishing Author Identity Metadata Project empowers authors to share or not share identity-related characteristics with their reader audiences. The project prioritizes self-description over the external description of traditional authority work and cataloging. It gives authors agency and opportunity to create meaningful relationships with their reader audiences. And I think that is the essence of the Live Places Publishing approach to author identity metadata, as opposed to, again, traditional cataloging. To help further contextualize the AIM project, it's important to note that the Library of Congress has made some progress in author identity metadata, specifically through the Library of Congress demographic group terms. The Library of Congress demographic group terms is a controlled vocabulary across multiple identity categories, including age, education, ethnic and culture, language, medical, psychological, or disability, nation or region, occupation or field of activity, religion, or social categorization. Professional catalogers may assign terminology from the demographic group terms to describe author or creator characteristics, or to describe the intended audience of the work in bibliographic records and name and authority files. Author or creator characteristics are recorded in the bibliographic record or the authority record for the work, specifically the 386 field. And as you can see on the slide, that's an example of a bibliographic record where demographic group terminology has been applied to the bibliographic record. So it provides information about gender, field of activity, religion, country of origin, some of the very things that we're talking about. And according to the Library of Congress, they are instructed to assign demographic group terms only when an author or creator identifies their characteristics explicitly, and only to derive those terms from so-called authoritative sources. However, we know well that interpretations are often biased and highly subjective, and definitions of authoritative sources will likely vary across different contexts and cultures. So although there is guidance from Library of Congress in how to apply these terms, it could be problematic and uneven in how they're applied by individual professional catalogers. As a general rule, professional catalogers exercise sound catalogers' judgment, but there may be unintended and pernicious consequences in assigning demographic characteristics without the express permission of the author or creator. Again, this is where the Live Places Publishing Author Identity Metadata Project differs rather significantly from the Library of Congress approach, namely by emphasizing author-identified and author-approved identity description over the practice of external description by professional catalogers. Moving on from cataloging and metadata to collections, the Author Identity Metadata Project supports important collection initiatives to decolonize and diversify academic library collections. The available metadata to perform collection diversity audits are limited currently to Library of Congress subject headings, which focus largely on aboutness of a work, Library of Congress classification, which co-locates similar types of works, and the Library of Congress demographic group terms, and publisher or press. With the exception of the demographic group terms, which is both new and unevenly applied, there are no metadata available currently to measure authorship diversity. The AIM project will provide critical metadata to assess the number or percentage of works in a library collection by historically and contemporaneously absented, marginalized, and underrepresented groups. The AIM project will also support acquisitions and collection development strategies, as author metadata can be incorporated into automated ordering profiles to acquire materials by an author in a specific demographic group or with specific demographic characteristics. Moving on from collections to discovery and research, the Author Identity Metadata Project supports more accurate and efficient search and retrieval processes for works by an author in a specific demographic group or with specific demographic characteristics, something that David was talking about earlier. Increasingly, researchers want to know more about authors and/or search by specific author characteristics. Although author information may be available in a resource's introduction, preface, book jacket, or on a publisher's website, finding it is time-consuming and often inefficient. The AIM project metadata will provide opportunities for faceted search within a library catalog or discovery platform. As previously mentioned, Library of Congress demographic group terms may be available in MARC records in BibFrame or in authority records, but the practice in applying those terms is still nascent and inconsistent. Moving on to reservations, as Katie and David mentioned, author safety and privacy is a big concern, and it is talked about in the instructions for professional catalogers and how to go about assigning identity metadata. I think competing and conflicting author metadata initiatives is a concern as well. As I mentioned, there's the Library of Congress demographic group terms, there's the Live Places Publishing Author Identity Metadata Project, and Gobi is in the process of developing personal book narrative profiling. So this could all result in inaccurate and inconsistent assignment of author identity metadata. So it's possible that multiple stakeholders are pursuing this initiative at the same time and may have different vocabularies or different applications that they're following. And then finally, greater potential for book profiling and book banning in some contexts. We are seeing increasing numbers of book challenges in public libraries, but also some book challenges and undermining of DEI initiatives in states where legislatures are defunding institutions who are undertaking the important work of DEI. So on to you, Amy.
Thanks, Jeremy. And really, I'm representing the vendor. And so what we're looking to do is to facilitate all of these different perspectives and interests. And so, what's at stake for us is enabling this discovery of experts by more than just their name or affiliation. We hear this all the time from library customers that they want to know more about the authors. If it's about developing studies, they would like to know, are these people from countries or regions where that is an issue and they've had some experience with it. And so that is something we want to facilitate for them, and then also to then go on and describe and market those titles effectively for the author, for the content provider, so that we're getting those titles into the right hands and to the right researchers and customers. And this is really important for our business as well, because we benefit by getting the right content to the right people. If we're irrelevant or we're not delivering the right content, that's only more headaches for us, for everyone involved. And so really, we want to get as full metadata and accurate metadata as possible to facilitate this, but also elevate the authors in any way possible and see their works thrive in the marketplace as well, and in the scholarly community as well. But beyond this, we want to represent those voices and the values and everything that are involved in these creations as well. We want to represent our values as a business, things we stand by, the content providers that we're hosting on our platforms, and then also for the authors and the customers. And we try to do this to the best of our abilities. Of course, with so many interests, that's perfection is maybe a high goal, but we at least try to make it as equitable and as accurate as possible in terms of how we're representing the content and facilitating the different interests among different people that we're working with. And then finally, what's at stake for us is supporting the collection development for customers. And in recent years, we have had a lot of requests to help analyze collections for both DEI, but also decolonizing the shelves. One really important area of this is you could have titles about, gender or Black studies, but are they authored by someone within that community? Their decolonization happens on not just the subject level, but also the author level or the institutional organization that's funding that study and creating that study. So there's multiple levels of that work that needs to be acknowledged and for that to be effective. And then just area studies, whatever geographic region and that kind of thing. We want to support them saying we have representation from within those areas as part of our collection, not just the subject. And then, another part of supporting the collection development is enabling automated approval selection plan, as well as title by title purchasing. So that metadata becomes very key to enable different levels of collection development. And when that data is missing, we might give them we might provide relevant matches and content, but we enhance that if we can have that additional data point. And then our reservations are really the management of identity taxonomies, just who manages the concerns, updates, final decisions. We certainly want the sources of identification to involve consent from the author and for that to be author-led. Those are consistent with our values and, just what we have pulled from our DEI advisory board and different, studies we've already done internally. And then finally, there's the technical and reporting considerations. You need somewhat of a standardization of the taxonomy and, if different people are working with different terms, how well can we map those? And, to create some consistency of experience for our users and our researchers. And then also concern is, as language evolves and identities evolve, how we keep up with that and how we're able to enable that growth in vocabulary. So those are some of the reservations, but certainly nothing we haven't dealt with in the past in a myriad of other ways and data points. And also on our end, we're dealing with both Onyx and MARC. So we have both the pre-publication metadata as well as the cataloging metadata that we're trying to facilitate. So we're working with multiple organizations and things there. So that's another part of the technical. So I think that this just builds upon what the various perspectives have already shared, and then just how we're then coordinating those. And then I'll just hand it over to you, David, for the survey outcome so far.
Thanks, Amy. So everyone on the panel has been part of a working group active for the past 5 or 6 months to implement and develop author identity metadata. Phase 1 for us was working with our author community and other external communities to try to come up with a list of initial categories from within which we will develop the selection metadata criteria. And we designed and developed this survey that we just launched recently. It is linked at the bottom. We're encouraging, asking, inviting all of you today to take this survey, share it with anybody out there, professors, students, librarians that you can get or you think would be eager to participate. It's of course completely anonymous. It does not collect any personal data. But in our first 52 responses, you can see that country of origin and country of location have led the way in the 2 areas that people are most interested in seeing. And then I also offered up on the slide just some examples of comments and responses that people have given us, and you can see in reading those that much of the concern that we've described is echoed, but also much of the opportunity and benefit is echoed. So please take the survey, share the survey, and we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'll invite Katie and Jeremy, Amy. Do you have any questions for each other? I'm going to keep it to maybe 2 minutes, and then I'm going to have to end our session. No questions for each other?
No, I think we represented it well. We had so many conversations before in developing this. I think, even our comments I've noticed, kind of were inclusive of those conversations. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks for putting in that visual, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
Okay, good. Well, with that, then I think we'll wrap it up. And I know this is part of the virtual conference, so you can just see us now in real person, real live, with for the question and answer session. So, thank you, Katie and Jeremy and Amy.
Thanks, David.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.